Hi, I'm Dr. Paul, and welcome to KWML Mastery. If you've come to this program, there's a chance that you've already heard of KWML, and you know that it stands for King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover. But what we're going to do in this program is greatly expand on what you may have already learned. There's also a free test that you can take at kwml.com. Maybe that's another reason that you're here. It wasn't that long ago that the video and the book, The Secret, came out. And when that happened, it got me thinking a lot about, what's really true scientifically about what brings good things into our lives, what betters our lives. And I quickly realized that a technology I'd been working on for a number of years called KWML, which on the surface is a way of looking at people's personality styles, also directly relates to what The Secret tries to be and fails. The Secret is based on the law of attraction, as it's called, which isn't a real law. It's based on the notion that hope is a good thing. And I think the people that I work with want more than just hope. They want effective techniques and tactics and strategies that will better their lives. Ultimately, what I realized is that it's friendship that results in all the good things that come to us in our lives, not just hopefulness and not passiveness. So one of the things that KWML is about is, sure, assessing people's personality styles, but we are going to use this technology in a way that is going to greatly amplify your power within your dating relationships, in your emotional attractiveness, and in your friendships. And all of these things are going to interrelate with each other in a way that simultaneously empowers your career choices. So how does KWML fit into the lineup of all the other products that we have for you? Well, some of the other products that you may have seen on the websites are going to be helpful for the process of courtship in your dating, perhaps in your exclusive relationships, in your marriage. And it's also going to be integrating with your personal growth as well. So KWML is sort of like an intermediate point between two areas involved with your psychology. One is your instincts, which evolutionary psychologists say are in your reptilian brain, and the other has to do with your character and your maturity, which the evolutionary psychologists say is in your higher brain. What we're going to focus on in this program is just exclusively the emotions and the intellect and how they compose a person's personality style based on the temperament that you were born with. And this is going to be directly applied to a lot of the choices that you're going to be making in your dating and relationships, as well as in the friendships that also empower your dating. So we're going to learn how to choose well in the first seconds to minutes of meeting a potential date, mate, or friend. We're going to learn how to communicate more effectively with people, how to truly know them and be known by them in a way that is predictive of future behavior to a certain degree. If you know that somebody is a king or queen or warrior or magician or lover, you have a general sense of the kinds of tastes and preferences that they have and likely future behavior between you and them in any kind of intimate connection that you have, such as a friendship or such as a dating situation, and certainly what would eventually occur in a marriage. I think that a lot of the difficulties that happen for people within marriage ultimately can be pinned on their KWML personality styles. You're going to find throughout this program that in general, if you choose somebody who's very different from you in style, that works out well in the sense that opposites attract. But if you pick somebody who's somewhat like your own personality style, that doesn't doom the relationship entirely. It just means it's going to be a lot more work. And most of the people I work with would like to have, as much efficiency in their lives as possible and as much pleasure and joy and happiness and minimal amounts of work if possible. So that's why I say this is going to help you choose well in the first seconds to minutes of meeting a new person that you might let into your life. As far as predicting future behavior, This is going to be relevant to possible future breakups or how to avoid them in the first place, avoiding future divorce, and looking at past relationships that you've had that didn't work out, and possibly for the first time understanding why they did not work out so well. That it really was neither person's fault. It's just that there wasn't a lot of attention being paid up front to the style of personality of the other person and whether they would integrate well with your life. This is going to be equally applicable to people or individuals, groups, families, teams, or organizations. One of the things that I enjoy doing with my friends is analyzing and labeling different groups, even things such as locations, such as cities. For example, I think of New York City as a kind of warrior-style city. I think of Los Angeles as a kind of magician-style city. Miami is a lover-style city. And Chicago is a king or queen-style city. You can almost get the general flavor of a locale and its people and average it out to a type of temperament or personality style. So you notice that the KWML has relevance even to the type of place that you choose to socialize in. One of the most common questions that I get from both men and women is, well, where do I go to find the right kind of person for me? Understanding the KWML at a deeper level than just the way we cover it in the ebook is going to enable you to pick and choose just the right environments to socialize in to maximize your social life. Ultimately, KWML is about friendship and beyond. It's about best friendship, in fact. When we choose somebody who is our opposite in personality style, but has similarities in beliefs and values and goals, that is the best friendship potential that we would all want. And certainly if you're going to evolve with another person in your intimate connection to them, beyond just being acquaintances who flirt or have some sexual attraction, if you're going to evolve to the place where you're actually going to commit to another person, then certainly you would want somebody who has the potential to be your best friend, not just an acquaintance or an ordinary friend. So KWML is about friendship. And there are all kinds of friendships. I mean, we have acquaintances, we have bar buddies, shopping buddies, dinner buddies, movie buddies, close friends, best friends. There are all levels of friendship involved. But ultimately, what you're going to find in this program is a pretty extremely useful concept that you can actually trace back to the philosopher Aristotle. And that's that there's a definition of friendship that can actually be scientifically defined. I define friendship as being mutual, shared, consistent, positive emotion, or consistent, mutual, shared, positive emotion. These four terms are crucial for looking at any friendship. And ultimately, what you're going to find with KWML is that in finding somebody of your opposite style of personality, that these four terms are maximized, especially if you're both mature people. So consistency in your friendship, mutuality, meaning it's not just one person leaning on another, it's both of you. Sharing, which is very crucial. If you've ever been in a long-distance relationship or had a long-distance friendship, at some point we have to have in-person friendship, in-person socializing, so that we have shared experience together. And a lot about technology has affected that today. We have texting and emailing, and we have online dating, and yet the human brain has evolved over millions of years not to be fit for that kind of technology, but to socialize in person. And the KWML takes care of this aspect for you too, that when you have shared experience with another person who's opposite in your personality style, you just have a maximized vitality to the relationship and high intimacy to the relationship. You really want to be there. And then the last two terms are positive emotion. A friendship is based on positive emotion. Some brief friendships and acquaintanceships might be based on the complaining of negative emotion, sort of like water cooler talk where we complain about the boss together. But you may have noticed in your life that those kinds of, quote, friendships don't last so long, or whenever there's stress or a challenge, those friends are just out the door. They're not your friends anymore. So consistent, mutual, shared positive emotion, while it sounds like a very sciencey definition, it's very precise. A person is not your friend if they're not consistent with you. They're not your friend if they're not mutual with you, if it's not a two-way street in your friendship. They're not your friend if you never get to share things together, if you don't communicate, or you don't live in the same town and you never see each other. Friendships sort of drift apart. And they're not your friend if they only share negative emotion or no emotion at all. Friendship ultimately is a form of love, and love, scientifically, can be defined as mutually raising each other's self-esteem or happiness level. That's all it is, scientifically. The KWML guarantees that you, paired up with another person who's your opposite in style, both emotionally and intellectually, are able to maximize each other's happiness and each other's self-esteem level, because the type of self-esteem that you're naturally filled with and naturally competent at expressing is exactly the type of self-esteem that the other person lacks naturally. So that by showing up to the table, just being who you really are, and not having to fake, not having to pretend to be something you think the other person wants you to be, you actually are just natural best friends, just being who you are. And what could be better than wanting somebody who's everything you're not and knowing that they want you for everything they're not? Now, some of the processes, some of the diagrams, the algorithms, the recipes, the step-by-step instructions that you're going to find in this program will overlap here and there with some of the other products of ours that you might have seen. The reason for this is twofold. For one, all of these products integrate together. It's almost like going to a university and getting a degree. You wouldn't just go take one course and get a degree for that. You would take all the relevant courses for your degree at university. So you're going to find some overlap. But our purposes today in learning about the KWML and mastering it are going to be very specifically to help you within friendships and to get you the kind of knowledge, technology, and power that's the real world version of what you may have heard of in that book called The Secret. Only this is real, because it's friendships which get you everything in your life. The other reason that you're going to see possibly some overlap between diagrams and concepts is that the brain is the brain is the brain. No matter how you use it, it's still the human brain we're talking about here. So a lot of the diagrams that I make for you are useful in many different ways, but the way we're going to apply KWML today is going to be related to your dating, your attractiveness, your relationships, and how friendship is involved in that whole process. We're going to leave out a lot of personal growth material. That's in the MindOS products. We're going to leave out some of the sexual attraction material, the more animal instinct stuff. We're going to leave that in the Omega for the males and the Seventh Sense program for female audience members. But ultimately, you're going to find, if we drill down into how this technology really works at a much deeper level than the KWML ebook, that you're going to be able to apply this with a degree of artistry. I want you to be able to practice this in your everyday social life so that we're not just learning it on an analytical level or just an educational level. This needs to be experiential for you, where you actually go and try it out in your real life. You're going to find it far more effective when you have both the left-brained and the right-brained understanding of how it works. One of the things that I try to do in all of my products is to take the complicated language of science and make it simple for people. I did that originally for myself, for my own understanding, and then for my thousands of patients, and now I'd like to do it for you too. Occasionally, we're going to use words that do have some technical meaning. Sometimes when I use words like personality or temperament or archetypes, this sort of thing, here's what I'm meaning. A lot of times we talk about personality and temperament as being the same thing. They're really not. The way of defining temperament is something that you might see in a newborn. You've heard of possibly colicky babies or curious babies or happy babies. There are all kinds of general mood and behavioral types of baby. That's temperament. It's what we're born with. We're all born with a basic constitution that eventually evolves into a rich, defined personality later in life. So we start off life with a temperament that's kind of crude and needs to grow, that's vaguely defined, but still labelable, still definable. And over the course of our lifetime, we develop quite a bit of individuality to our personality, okay? So one of the bits of research that I looked up for you comes from Joanne Ellison Rogers, Psychology Today, December 2006, where she observes that personality might change over the lifetime. Now, what I've seen in practice in medicine over many thousands of patients is that indeed personality does change over the lifetime. Sometimes we're just mincing words here, but your personality becomes more and more mature as you age and have experience and as you learn personal growth lessons, but your temperament never changes. That's like the starting line of the race of your life. It's your starting point in life. So of course it doesn't really change. It's what you were born with. And so when I talk about kings or queens, warriors, magicians, or lovers, these are just general names given to 4 types of temperament, and with that temperament we can grow a lot into a well-defined personality style. In Ms. Rogers' study, she talks about personality as being defined as patterns of thought, emotion, and motive. These are the same elements of the psyche that I talk about in another program called MindOS. Temperament she defines as the early baseline levels of these. And you might say that in our temperament, we're imbalanced. If you've ever heard of somebody being described as a little bit off, or somebody's off their rocker, or somebody's off the wall, okay? This description is a description of imbalance. And so when we're born into a temperament, that is an imbalanced state to be in. We're not at a homeostasis. We're not at a level point from which to work and be solid and stable in our behavior. So as we go through the lifetime, we grow more and more stability, more and more balance. So a lot of what you'll see in the diagrams of this program hint at this notion that things that are imbalanced are less healthy, less good for us, less powerful or effective, and states that we can get into that are more balanced and equal on both sides are healthier and more powerful and more effective for our lives. Rogers lists what she calls the big 5 factors in personality: conscientiousness and handling tasks, agreeableness, change in neuroticism, in other words, the amount of baggage that you have, and worry and insecurity, openness to new experience, and finally extroversion, the ability to reach out to others. Psychoanalysts have known about this for the last 30 years, but the positive psychologists, it's a division of psychology, are catching up both the scientific community and the lay public to get us focused less on pathology and what's negative about people's psychology and more about people's potential for future growth. MindOS and KWML. About 10 years ago, I developed a new method of teaching psychology to people through simple terms and diagrams, and realized that since a picture is worth 1,000 words, and a lot of people are very visual learners, it became quickly obvious to me that this advance was going to change the whole way people really view psychology and relationships, because you can literally see what's happening between people through diagrams. And because MindOS explained all of psychology and plugs into nearly any kind of human problem I applied it to, I trademarked it as MindOS, the operating system of the human mind. Well, KWML is a small part of MindOS. It's addressing only the emotional parts of our lives, the part related to teaming up with others, to friendship and love, whether that be in families, friendships, romance, or even business relationships. Just like a computer needs an operating system to run software, your mind is a software and your brain is a computer. It's hardware. And so it has an operating system of its own that's naturally evolved biologically. So the system of diagrams that I use in MindOS for your personal growth and KWML for understanding your friendships, love, your relationships that involve teamwork and aligning with each other, these are going to revolutionize your life and make it a lot more efficient at getting to your goals, including any goals you have in interpersonal relationships. So KWML and MindOS are true syntheses. They're a combining of all the schools of psychology that came before this model, brought together into one new model that is a set of diagrams, pictures, and they are patent pending. And in having brought together these technologies into a new form. So as such, what looks simple on the surface is not at all simple underneath. A lot of my diagrams and terms are very easy to understand, and that's part of what's so appealing about them. But at the same time, it's important that you understand the term elegance and what that means. It means that what's on the surface is simple and easy, but what's underneath is very complex. So what's underneath both MindOS and KWML is some pretty complex stuff that I've simplified for you. The complexity is what makes it so accurate and so useful. The simplicity is what makes it practical and easy to understand. Now, the difference between KWML and what has been termed Jungian psychology is pretty big for this reason. KWML is not based in Jungian psychology. The names are similar to what a lot of Jungian psychologists like to use, because Jungian psychology has a lot to do with storytelling and symbols. And since I do use a lot of symbols and diagrams, it'd be easy to think that this is Jungian psychology, or that I am a Jungian psychologist. I'm not. The reason ultimately that this is not is because it's a synthesis of many schools of psychology, not just the one called Jungian psychology. There was a book over a decade ago written by Moore and Gillette called King, Warrior, Magician, Lover. And I know a lot of people have picked up that book because of the similarities in the names. And at one point, I started to read that book. I really liked the title. I liked the names. And since these names say so much, and Jungian psychologists like the names King, Warrior, Magician, and Lover, it made sense to me to use those names in describing these four styles of personality. But there really is no connection between that book and this technology, except for the names. One of the things that's also true about the book is that it was not designed to help people with relationships. It was designed for men only, to look at their lives through Jungian terms. And that's not what we're doing here. We're looking at dating and relationships and attraction, not just at the symbolism of male personal growth. My material has these same four names, but it relies far more on psychodynamic therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, object relations, something called intersubjectivity theory, cognitive science, and even aspects of economic theory. So I just wanted this to be very clear to you, that this is not Jungian psychology. It's a new and true synthesis of a lot of different schools of psychology. So the concept of elegance. I hope that you will find this method of understanding people and understanding love and friendship, especially best friendship, I hope you'll find it to be an elegant model. And I hope that you yourself will start thinking about what this word elegance means. I would like you to cultivate elegance in your own life. It means taking the complex and setting it down as very simple. It'll be a good thing for your life to become more efficient through things being simpler and yet not throwing out the complexity of science and the usefulness of science in your life. What's elegant is also simple, but what is simple may not be elegant. You might say that in learning the KWML method of personality, love, and friendship, that you're developing a kind of extra sense, a seventh sense. A lot of people have heard of having a sixth sense. It's like having a gut feeling or an intuition or instinct, and everyone knows what the five senses are. But a seventh sense would be something even more than just a gut instinct. The way that I define it is having a gut instinct or intuition, but also knowing exactly why you do. So in learning this technology, just as in learning a lot of our other technologies, such as MindOS, you're going to find that you have just a better feel for people and what makes them tick based on their personality. But this time you're also going to know why. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is, what is the difference between a skill and a sense? A skill would be something that we have to get an education about. We have to go learn step by step what you do, like driving a car, for example. You learn step by step how it works, and then you go ahead and do it, and you practice, and you get good at driving a car. And you have to do the same steps over and over every time you drive. A sense, though, is something different from just a skill. A sense is something that really becomes a part of you, or already is a part of you, like your eyesight, your hearing, your sense of touch are already built into you, and you can get better and better at using them. For example, if you became a photographer or videographer, over time, your visual sense becomes more and more attuned and accurate. Or if you were a concert pianist or violinist, you would find over many years of practice that your sense of hearing becomes more and more acute and accurate, and perhaps creative as well. The same is true of the KWML, or anything that I term a seventh sense. It's already built into you what your personality is like, what your temperament is like. It's already built into others what their personality and their temperament are like. And you already have a kind of innate ability to sense other people's nature and what they're likely to do in the future. This is going to bring that out in you. It's why it's called KWML Mastery. It's going to bring out that natural ability that you already have and lay it out for you in diagrams and explain why things are as they are between you and others, as far as whether you get along or don't get along so well. Some examples of this difference between a skill and a sense. I once had a professor in medicine, pathology actually, named Dr. Robert E. Lee. And the first day of medical school, he brought in a sort of a glob of tissue on a tray and set it down in front of us and said, "Okay, class, this is day one of medical school, let's get started. What is this thing?" And everybody sort of looked at it, and it was, somebody said liver, it was kind of lung-shaped, and somebody said a lung. And Dr. Lee said, "Yeah, of course it's a lung, but that's not really telling me what it is. I want you to get precise. What is this thing exactly?" And nobody could say beyond they thought it was a lung. He said, let me ask you a second question. He said, if my own mother walked in this room, would any of you recognize her as my mom? And of course the answer is no. He goes, well, I would, and the reason is I have seen her thousands of times in my life, so of course I instantly recognize her. The same is true of this piece of tissue, and I recognize it because I've seen it thousands of times. It's emphysema. It's a lung with emphysema. So what I'm telling you here is that there's a lot of value in experience, the kind of knowledge and ability you acquire just through doing things and living among people and being around them and getting a sense of what makes them tick. That's what the KWML is about, even while it's very accurate in a more organized, left-brained way too. So it's not good enough to just take the KWML test or to read the KWML ebook. You need to master this material through living your life and socializing and trying it out. I really want you to try out a lot of the material that we're going to learn here. A second example of the difference between just a learned, educated skill and actually having a sense that's based on experience is in one of the books by the author Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote a book a couple years ago called Blink. And at the beginning of that book, he talks about how there were a set of statues, ancient Greek statues, so they thought, bought by the Getty Museum in Los Angeles. And they unveiled these statues to the art community. And when they did so, there was kind of a gasp in the audience. And these art critics and artists said, oh, you know, we're so sorry for you because those are fakes. And the curator was like, what? We paid $20 million for these, and we tested them, and we put them under an electron microscope, and we authenticated them, and we know they're real, so you're wrong. And the artist said, no, I'm sorry, we've seen this 1,000 times, and these are fakes. We know fakes when we see them. Even though they hadn't looked at them under an electron microscope and done all the fine measurements that made the museum curator think that they were real, but they had been had, and they were fakes, and it was based on experience and the sense of these artists through their experience as artists that gave them this kind of detailed knowledge that was, in the end, more accurate and powerful than an electron microscope. That's what I want you to get at with this KWML Mastery program, is having a sense, not just a skill. The power of visual diagrams and symbols is also going to be an aspect of this for you. When they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, it really is. So there are going to be so many pictures and diagrams in this program that it's probably worth millions of words and hundreds of hours of instruction. So I hope you enjoy that part as well. In using any of the technologies that I teach you, it's really important to begin with one concept, one learned human skill or sense that most of us develop during adolescence or late latency period of life, and that's called observing ego. It's a concept that psychoanalysts talk about, and it's very similar to mindfulness, to being in the present-minded state. And ultimately, you're going to find this fascinating. If there were a scientific explanation of what it is to be cool, everybody wants to be cool, right? As in keeping your cool, as in being a hip, cool person. Being cool, basically, is scientifically defined as having a well-cultivated observing ego. And what that is the ability to read social situations. It's almost like a social common sense where you read a social situation and you also are taking a look at your own self and seeing how you fit into the social situation. And you always do and say the right thing in the right way at the right time. That's what makes somebody a cool person, isn't it? It's not how wealthy they are, or how good looking they are, or how muscular or fit they are. It's saying and doing the right thing in the right way at the right time. That's what makes somebody cool. And so I want you to cultivate this skill in yourself, the ability to sort of stop what you're doing and pay attention to yourself, to how you're feeling, how you're thinking, and how you're behaving in a social setting, while noticing your surroundings socially so that you can match up with what the social environment needs at any given time. The KWML empowers this ability for you by being able to read people and their personality styles live in real time, so that you end up not having any regrets later. The cause of most people's regrets in life is that they weren't using observing ego at the time they needed to use it. They were not so conscious, not so awake and aware socially of what was going on. And then days or weeks or months after the fact, you hit yourself in the forehead and you go, what was I thinking? Why did I say that or do that? Or why didn't I do something? And it's because you weren't cool in that moment that you needed to be. Observing ego gives you that ability. And KWML is empowered by your observing ego and amplifies it because it tells you how to pick and choose the way people are going to tend to behave in your environment based on their temperament or personality style. So in this way, I'm making a case for you that mastering KWML makes you cooler. It really does, scientifically proven. Let's drill down just a little bit into this sense that you can develop and grow called observing ego, the scientific explanation of cool or being cool. It's something that is so important to cover really in everything I teach, because without it, it's impossible to change or grow as a person. You can't mature or change or grow without the ability to have observing ego. And this is also the reason that a lot of people, regardless of their chronological age, still might not be up to that level in their maturity inside. Because we can't grow or mature if we're not paying attention to what's happening around us and learning lessons from it. So as I said, observing ego is something that you can access as a sense or a skill in the present moment. Think of some of the things that can't be done in the past or the future. Things like making decisions. You know, our decisions are already made in the past. They haven't been made yet in the future. Or taking an action. We can't take actions in the past. They've already been done. We can't take actions in the future because it's not here yet. Another one would be using your five senses. We can't use our five senses in the past or the future. You can't smell something from the past or taste something from the future, not with as much acuity as you do right now in the present moment. And lastly, intimacy, truly connecting with another person where you get each other, you understand each other. That can only be done with two people being present-minded at the same time. So these things happen to be methods for you to use to get yourself more present-minded. Making decisions, taking actions, being intimate with someone else, or using your five senses, such as having a meal, or the only other human activity that might use up to five senses, having sex. These are all things that get you very present-minded and focused and attentive. And when you are in that state of mind, you are automatically cool. You're automatically using observing ego. This is going to help you a lot in learning the KWML at a more masterful level. Another way of looking at this is to say that every day we're always spending time. We are spending our time being conscious, awake, and aware in one of three time frames. We're either living in the past in our head, we're living in the present, and we're awake and aware of what's going on around us and what's going on inside of us. In other words, we're being cool and having observing ego, or we're living in the future in our heads, past, present, or future. It so happens, if you've heard of the notion of left-brainedness and right-brainedness, Left brain people are more logical, analytical, and organized. Right brain people are more creative, artistic, spontaneous. The left brain invents the idea of the past for us. The right brain invents the idea of the future for us. So we're pretty unique as human beings with this kind of sense of time. If you noticed, what would it be like to be a rock? There is no past or future for a rock. A rock is just a rock, and it goes on forever being a rock. It gets eroded, gets built up, but it's still a rock. It doesn't have a sense of time. We have a sense of time as human beings because we have a left brain and a right brain. And our left brain tells us there's history, and it's organized and arranged row on row, and it matters, and it's useful. We can learn lessons from it, from the past. Our right brain tells us, hey, there's this thing called the future, and it's endless possibilities that we can choose from in the future, and we can aim at the future and try to get what we want for our lives in the future, but it's not here yet. And it's useful too, because it helps us plan. It helps us set goals, head in a certain direction. But both the past and the future are fabricated by our own minds, by the left brain and the right brain. Well, if we spend all of our time, or most of it, in the present, then we are spending most of our time being cool. And once again, we can do this by making decisions, taking actions, using our five senses, and intimately connecting with another person, really being on their same wavelength. And while we are in that present-minded state, we have observing ego ability. We are awake and aware and at the steering wheel of our lives. This also means then that if we go around daydreaming, thinking of the past and reminiscing or regretting something, or thinking of the future and daydreaming about it, or maybe worrying about it, while we are in the past or the future in our heads, we are a little less alive and we are on autopilot. We are on autopilot. In other words, we're being unconscious. So when you use the KWML, I want you to be awake and aware and attentive to what's going on. Using your observing ego doesn't just enable you to look at others and assess what style of personality they have in their KWML personality style. Observing ego also enables you to take a look at yourself. So if you look at this diagram, you'll see an I representing you, looking back on you, and it's represented by a circle, and inside is you, or me, and your resources. And there are three kinds of personal resources, psychological resources. Those are emotional energy, intellectual structure or data, and your decision-making power, or your will. And your boundary rounds things out, and this is what really defines the psyche, or your personhood. Lawyers and judges actually have a legal definition of a person that uses these four items: your personal boundary, or your rights and responsibilities, your privacy, your emotional energy, your emotional state, your intellectual state, and your will, okay? Your rights to take action, make decisions. Observing ego simply gets you in a place to be looking at all these aspects of yourself. So while you're out socially, you might be noticing other people's personality styles, their KWML styles, but it's also important to be noticing how you're feeling at any given time and how you're communicating and thinking. I was talking a little bit about balance earlier, and how anything that's balanced is healthy psychologically, and anything that's imbalanced is less healthy psychologically, less powerful, and less effective. And so I wanted to start talking about the importance of a spectrum. One of the things that I do in all of my products is I think in a quantum psychology way. Now, this word quantum has been thrown around a lot by marketers. and use to sex up their products and services because it sounds so scientific and technological. But what the word quantum would mean in any science would simply be the dual ability to both label something but simultaneously respect its individuality. In quantum physics, the essence of something being quantum is that reality and matter can be either a particle or a wave, okay? That energy can be contained in a particle or in a wave at the same time. A particle implies a specific point, okay? A specific individual point. And a wave is defined as being on a spectrum, okay? And being labelable. So in the KWML, you're going to find that we actually use two spectra, one for your emotions and one for your intellect, okay, your intellectual style. And we cross those spectra and look at what we get in terms of quadrants, four styles of personality. So this is a true quantum psychology, because even while we can label a man or a woman as being a king or a queen, a warrior, a magician, or a lover, at the same time, we also respect that every human being is an individual. So just by labeling somebody a king or queen, warrior, magician, or lover doesn't lock them into some sort of doom or fate of some sort, nor does it make every king the same as every other king, or every magician female the same as every other magician female. We can both label people and also respect their individuality. And that's why this is a quantum psychology. In thinking further about what a spectrum is, let's consider what would it be like to really understand what is on each end of any spectrum. And if you could master each end of a spectrum of anything, then what would you be able to master? You'd be able to master everything in between the two ends of the spectrum. So a lot of what we do to economize your learning in this program and others is to teach you the two extremes of every spectrum we look at, and that means you'll be able to master everything that happens on the spectrum in between. Now, even as we learn how to label people's personality styles or their temperament style, at the same time it's important to understand what is maturity. And maturity matters in this model, and you're going to find that the more distant and imbalanced we are on the spectra that we're going to look at, the less effective, less powerful, and less mature we are. The closer to the center of a spectrum that we are in this model, the more healthy, more balanced, more powerful, and ultimately more mature we are being, or other people are being. So we happen to attract and form bonds with people who are of similar maturity level to ourselves. I want you to really remember that concept. So even if you learn what a king or a queen are, what a warrior is in personality style, what a magician or what a lover are in personality style, it's simply not enough to just understand that, yep, they're a magician, or they're a queen, or they're a warrior. You need to also understand how mature as a person are they. That's going to matter too, to what kind of friendship you're going to have with them. Because if you remember our definition of friendship at the beginning, both in terms of how I define it using this science, and as well how Aristotle defined friendship with these four types of term, that friendship is consistent, mutual, shared, positive emotion. You're going to find that in the KWML, the more mature a person is, regardless of what their specific personality style is, the more consistent they're going to be, the more mutual they're going to be in the friendship, or win-win in their behavior. The more they're going to share and be good communicators with you, and typically the more positive they're going to be as people with their emotional energy. So the more mature you are, the more mature people are that you befriend, the better things go. The more you are going to have a good bond with somebody and a good friendship. Higher friendship through higher maturity. And as we do this, it's important to be yourself as we go along, but strive to be your best self, okay? Staying at the same maturity level and not learning or growing isn't okay. It's part of what we're here for in life, is to change and grow more mature as we go along. And that's where all the rewards of life come from. It comes directly out of the maturity of your character. I cover that very heavily in Mind OS. And in this model, you're going to see some hints of how to tell if somebody's more mature or less mature, and therefore a good or bad match for you as a friend, or in dating, or in a relationship or marriage. So as we go along learning the KWML and what it means to your life, to your dating, to your romance, to your friendships, to your relationships, ultimately there's going to be a concept that's very crucial that we understand right away. There's been a debate for probably thousands of years over the notion in romance of whether opposites attract or does like attract like. Do birds of a feather flock together or do opposites attract? Well, in the models that I use, it happens to be both, okay? We go into much greater detail about the entire process of courtship for men in the Omega Male program and for women in the Seventh Sense program. But in this program, we are going to drill down to the specifics of just emotional attraction, or what you could call love. We're not talking about sex. We're not talking about passion and sexual attraction. We're also not talking about the fine details of commitment. We're only talking about love. Love is purely emotional. There can be love without sex. There can be sex without love. There can be love without commitment. There can be commitment, such as being two roommates, without love, if you can't stand your roommate. In this program, we're only talking about love. So I want that to be understood. And I want it to be understood that in this program, we are looking at how opposites attract in personality style. Birds of a feather flock together, like attracts like, in terms of what we care about, what our beliefs and values and goals in life are. We need to share in common. But our style of doing things needs to be the opposite. That's why it's both. Like attracts like and opposites attract. Both of these are true. For example, what if you were dating another person who is a Republican but you're a Democrat? Okay? That might not work out so well because you have different, very different sets of values and beliefs about how the world works. But what if you were both Democrats or both Republicans, like attracts like, but you also had identical styles of doing things? Say that you were both shy and reserved, not very outgoing people. Say that you're both very brainy and liked reading books, and were very nurturing and kind, and not very confident and outgoing. Even though you're both Democrats or both Republicans, your relationship is still going to have tons of problems because you have identical styles of personality. When challenges in life come along, what are you going to do about them? Who's going to be the leader? If you're both nurturers and neither of you are very confident people, who's going to be the one to stand up and fight against the stress coming in at you both? It won't work out so well. That's where KWML comes in. Because if you choose somebody to align yourself with as a friend, a best friend, a lover, as a romance, as a marriage partner, then you have a perfect complementarity of personality styles, so that when stresses hit your life as a couple together, you have a complete set of tools for dealing with all the stresses that life brings. even though you both do want to be Democrats or both be Republicans, because you'll get along better in terms of both believing the same stuff, having the same values. That's how it's both like attracts like and opposites attract. Like attracts like in what you believe in and value, opposites attract in terms of your style as people, your skills and competence. Now, in some of our larger models, I use an old model that's pretty intriguing that the evolutionary psychologists have used called the triune brain theory. And that divides the brain up into three parts. Actually, we should call it the mind. The mind is divided into three parts: the reptilian brain, the mammalian brain, and the higher brain or human brain. We are going to look at the emotional brain, the mammalian brain, the most in this program. A little bit into the higher brain as well, into your intellect. But the emotional brain is where it's at for this program, and for love and friendship. Now, our bigger programs are gigantic programs for men called the Omega Male Program, or for women called the Seventh Sense Program. These cover all three areas of the mind: reptilian, mammalian, and higher brain. But in this program, we're going to drill down into the mammalian brain, the emotional areas of the brain. If there were an anatomical location where this area of the mind is located, we might call it the midbrain anatomically. But remember, there's hardware and there's software. We're looking at the software here, which is called the mind, the emotional mind. And this brain is pretty sophisticated. It's more advanced than our more base instincts, our animal instincts, because it's about emotional reaction to local or personal events. The emotional brain deals with socially important human situations, such as friendship, and assigning emotional value to events, information, symbols, or people. Now, the reason I'm mentioning evolution and an evolutionary look at areas of the mind and how they work together is because if we look at the mind as software, then just like on a computer, you can have different software packages that use each other and work with each other. The same is true of the human mind. And so you could say that the software we're looking at today is kind of like the software of love and friendship. It's the operating system that controls how love and friendship work for human beings. While these are very artistic and creative topics, right, because poets and artists and novelists and dramatists have certainly used love and friendship as themes of their works of art, probably since the first human being, it's useful to look at in terms of science, too, for our purposes, because they developed for a reason. Friendship and love evolved for a reason. And one of the reasons, probably the most important reason they evolved, is because at some point our brains got advanced enough that for the first time we could actually make alliances with each other as human beings, where there was strength in numbers, okay? Where the power of two was far, far greater than the power of one. And this is certainly true in our friendships, in our romances, definitely in a marriage, or on any team. So KWML is also a technology of teamwork. Teamwork gave the human species an enormous advantage over other animals at being able to survive. That when we could become agrarian societies that grew food instead of just having to hunt for food, being a team that cultivated that and made it happen was far more powerful than just one person trying to do it. And when we aligned ourselves against common enemies or against the elements or against dangerous other species of animal that would try to attack us, we were far more powerful as teams than we could ever be as individual animals. And so there's a very real scientific and evolutionary basis to why friendship itself exists and why love exists. Love evolved in us because it actually helped us survive as a species. So that might be a little alarming and unartistic to you, but I think it's also pretty profound. It means love never goes away. Friendship will never go away. Neither of these will ever be fads of culture. They won't fall out of favor because they're millions of years old and we literally need them to survive. You know, if you look at a contrast here, there's a condition in newborn infants called failure to thrive. And failure to thrive, you hear about this in Russian or Asian orphanages where there aren't enough nursing staff. And newborns die when they don't have direct human contact from a caregiver. The same is true of every other human being. We die, at least on the inside, at least in our sense of feeling alive, feeling passion for life. We die when we don't have friends or when we don't have love in our lives. And so you see, in a very literal way, our health is at stake, our survival is at stake, our spiritual survival, feeling alive is at stake when we don't have enough friends or understand friendship well enough to be able to get love into our lives. In fact, we're going to learn a little bit later that this mammalian brain, this software of the emotions, this software of love and friendship, is actually what creates the whole concept of valuing something or someone. Have you ever felt not valued enough? Not valued enough in a dating situation or in a relationship or maybe in your marriage or your former marriage? When you're not valued, literally what's going on is the thought of you doesn't make the other person very happy. That's value. When we feel a sense of self-esteem or happiness, positive emotion in other words, in connection to the idea of another person or the idea of a thing, a material object, then we don't value them. If we don't feel self-esteem and happiness, we don't value something or someone. When we do value someone or something, it's that we feel happiness or a boost of self-esteem. In other words, we feel love for that person or that object. When I say I love my car, it's because the thought of my car makes me feel happy. When I say I love my dog, it's because the thought of my dog makes me feel happy. Well, when we love each other as human beings, we make each other feel happy. We raise each other's self-esteem. So this is all encoded by this love software of the mammalian brain. The ability to value someone else and to be valued by other people then has everything to do with your skill at being a friend, your skill at creating happiness for someone else or boosting their self-esteem. The KWML is going to directly target this ability. If you are working with somebody who is a king or queen, a warrior, a magician, or a lover, there are unique ways that these personality styles can feel happiness. Certain specific things make them feel happy. And if you know what those things are, then you can do the things that make them feel happy and teach them how to make you feel happy in a way that suits your personality style. And then what does that do? It raises your value to each other, and it amplifies, literally, in a science-based way, it amplifies how much you are loved and how much you love them, as if by a recipe or by following a roadmap. This is what we're learning. So that was the mammalian brain. We do need to know a little bit about the higher brain too, or the human brain. This is software of the intellect of maturity and of character, which if we had to localize it and pinpoint it into a specific part of the actual human brain, would be in the cerebral cortex. Okay? So the cerebral cortex is the hardware of the intellect and of maturity, and the software of the intellect and the maturity, evolutionary psychologists would call the higher brain. Okay? This higher brain is responsible for all logic, creativity, decision-making, ethics, identity, and interacting with others through diplomatic or civil ways. It's the reason that we have the phrase civilization or the term civilization. It's why the human species can actually build civilizations where lower animals cannot. It's because we have the largest cerebral cortex. Except maybe dolphins have a larger cerebral cortex. I'm not sure about that, but they don't have limbs. So let's say our limbs give us kind of an advantage too. But you get the picture, that the larger the cerebral cortex, the higher the intellect, the intelligence, the wisdom of decision making, and very crucially, the concept of having boundaries with others, a sense of rights and responsibilities and privacy. It's something unique to this software of the mind called the higher brain, located in the cerebral cortex. We're going to need to learn about this area of the brain a little bit too, because part of what makes up your KWML personality style is intellectual, your intellectual style. Specifically, you remember me talking about the left brain and the right brain. Those are the two ends of the spectrum of your intellectual style. And you might say that they're located in the higher brain software of the mind. This is the civilizing force in civilization, and it's actually responsible through the process of friendship and teamwork and love, aligning with other people to actually create organizations, to develop laws and the rights and the customs and stories and the art, all of that in the world. As such, it works with your mammalian brain, your emotional circuits of the brain that we just started learning about, to also combine to create what we call beliefs. So we're going to learn a lot about beliefs a bit later in this program too, in that beliefs are a connection between an idea and how much emotional energy is attached to it. You know, when you think about things you believe in, there is emotion to that. You can't have a belief and have it not be very emotional at all. Otherwise, you don't really care. You don't have a specific opinion on something if you don't feel emotion for it too. So you start to see how our emotional circuits of the brain need to operate with our intellect as well. Combined, the KWML matters because it combines your intellectual style with your emotional style to tell you what your personality style in general is. All right, we need to talk a bit about the crucial human need for friendship. And this relates a little bit to what I was saying about the secret and the law of attraction, which aren't based in science, they're just selling hope. And I think hope is a good thing, but the people that I want to help need more than just hope. They need results, they need techniques and tactics and strategy, and practicality. And it's really through friendship that we achieve all the happiness and all the success that we get in our lives. That's the real key. And KWML is a technology of friendship and teamwork, ultimately, in your relationships, at work, in your personal life. So, psychology is an invisible thing. The invisible nature of psychology makes it difficult to see that regardless of family connections, contracts, licenses, including marriage licenses, agreements, leases, job descriptions and promises, boss and employee roles and expectations, that without friendship, There's no true durable bond or glue between people. So what I'm getting at by this is that since psychology is invisible and yet very real, it's just like the borders and lines on a map. They're invisible and yet very real. You know, when you cross out of one state or one country and into another country, you don't literally see a line painted on the ground, and yet it is a very real thing to cross that border. Psychology works in the same way. And so as a result, all these diagrams and recipes and algorithms and visual ways of looking at psychology is going to really empower you, because you're literally seeing the invisible nature of psychology as if it were a roadmap or a diagram. And within all of these kinds of social situations among people, whether it's family connections or contracts, as we said, or agreements, or being in the workplace, the relationship between a boss and employee, between a husband and wife, or between two friends, there's no true durable bond or glue between people without friendship or love. And that's how important this is. You know, if you were in the workplace in a corporation and you looked at things like your job description and how you get along with other people, and you noticed, well, hey, I do all these things on my job description, and then you end up fired, or someone else ends up promoted, and you look at all the intellectual bits of data in the job description and say, wait a minute, why didn't I get promoted? Or why did I get fired? Well, guess what? Promotion or firing, intimacy or breakup or divorce, none of these things happen because of intellectual reasons. They happen because of the level of bond between two human beings, the amount that you are valued. I'm sure at some point in your life, maybe in the workplace, you've seen a person that you think is kind of a clown, kind of a buffoon, and their resume is horrible, and they certainly didn't go to Harvard. They went to the City College of yada yada in such and such country, and you're just wondering, why is this person such a star in the corporation? I don't get it. Their resume is terrible. They don't have any kind of pedigree. How is it that they are so powerful? How is it that they get promoted? Or you might look at other people's relationships, like, you know, you look at the beautiful woman with the short, fat, bald, poor guy and say, how in the world did that guy get her? Or you see the couple made up of the handsome Prince Charming with the very mousy-looking woman, and you say, how in the world did she get that guy? Well, it doesn't have to do with the intellectual data in a person's resume, and it doesn't have to do with how they look on paper. It has to do with their mastery of friendship ability, that bond or glue between people that we could call love. Their ability to be valuable through making someone else happy. All right? That's what KWML is about. That's why this is so crucial for you to understand. Because if you understand other people's KWML temperament or personality style, then you understand how to make them happiest, and therefore how to make yourself the most valuable. This is the reason that people get hired or fired or promoted. This is the main reason that people get deeper into intimacy versus getting broken up with or divorced with. It's an invisible force, just like self-helpy type stuff like The Secret and the Law of Attraction say there's invisible forces. But this is the real science of what's going on, and it's not just hopefulness. The real force is an emotional force. It's positive emotional energy, which can also be called self-esteem, or it could be called happiness. And love is the process of raising that in each other, and value is the amount of that happiness we feel about another person. So when a boss promotes an employee, it's because that employee made the boss feel happiness when the boss thought of that employee. When an employee is fired, it's because that employee made the boss feel unhappy at the thought of that employee. When somebody gets deeper into intimacy and connection, has a valuable relationship, it's because the other person made them feel happy. When somebody gets broken up with or divorced, it's because the thought of the other person made them feel unhappy. That's what this is all really about. And that's the crucial human need for friendship. Now, we briefly mentioned this. Let's drill a little deeper into the concept of, does like attract like, or do opposites attract? And it turns out it's both. Like attracts like in the higher brain, in the intellectual areas, the maturity areas. The cerebral cortex would be the hardware. And I cover this very extensively for men in the Omega Male program and for women in the Seventh Sense program. But for our purposes, we're looking at how opposites attract in style. Okay? Opposites attract in style emotionally because two people of opposite personality styles will have opposite styles of using emotion. So a king or queen has an opposite style of emotion from a magician. A lover, male or female, has an opposite style of emotion from a warrior. We are born with these styles of emotion. They form our temperament. Each of us is more gifted at either being a kind of nurturing, kind person or a more outgoing, action-oriented, confident person. And we're going to learn more about that later. Bonding in friendship. Let's underscore this crucial core definition of friendship once again, that friendship is consistent, mutual, shared positive emotion. Let's look at how friendship does not imply commitment, nor does it imply a sexual connection. This is very important for both men and women to understand if we apply the KWML to our dating. In the sexual attraction areas of the mind, we have lust, or we have passion, we have sexual desire. That is not the same thing as love. Love is in the mammalian brain area of the mind, in the emotional circuits. Lust or passion or desire are not the same thing as love. Love does not equal passion, desire, or lust. So how many men or women have made this mistake where they slept with a person and just assumed that that must mean they are loved, or even that they are valued? I'm sure there are many women out there who have had sex and then felt not so valued. That's because there was not enough time spent bonding in a friendship way, in a teamwork way, in the mammalian brain. It's an important distinction. The same thing is true in how love is a different thing from commitment. Commitment is located in the higher brain software. Love is located in the mammalian brain software. Just like you could love somebody while not feeling committed to them, or you could be committed to somebody. Somebody, for example, that you have a contract with, like a roommate with whom you share a lease. You're committed to the contract legally, but you might not love or value that person. So that's another important distinction to make. Well, one of the great things about friendship itself is that it neither demands that there be a sexual chemistry, nor does it demand that there be an absolute commitment. When we form friendships with other people, whether they be male or female, the reason behind the friendship is simply that we make each other feel emotionally happy. We don't sign a contract saying, I agree to call my friend 5 times a week, or agree to always be on time. nor do we agree that we have to have a sexual attraction for each other. That's unconscious and instinctual. We can't decide that sort of thing. So one of the great things about friendship is that it's not necessarily committed. It's not necessarily contracted. It's voluntary. We're there voluntarily. And this is one of the things that frequently men and women forget about, or just never detect or pick up on. They think that once they agree to be boyfriend or girlfriend, husband or wife, that there's some implied contract that guarantees they will love each other, as if it's voluntary for them to love each other. The only thing that makes us love each other is if we have the ability to raise each other's level of self-esteem. If we have the ability to love, then we have the ability to have value. We value the other person because they make us happy. They value us because we make them happy. This isn't something that we can contract. That's one of the best things about friendship. And in a certain light, it's one of the worst things about friendship, because it would be nice to think that if we make a promise to love each other, that we have an agreement and there's a contract and it's signed and guaranteed. It's one of the worst things about friendship. It'd be nice to have guarantees like that. The reason I'm teaching you about KWML is that the closest thing to an absolute guarantee of love, an absolute guarantee of valuing somebody else, is in choosing a person who naturally, just because of who they are and the temperament they were born with, naturally possesses all of the things emotionally and intellectually, the skills, the competencies, the maturity that you don't naturally have. And you have all the things naturally, emotionally, and intellectually that they don't naturally have. Because since friendship is a voluntary thing that we come to because we're just emotionally attracted to someone who makes us feel happier, and that we naturally value somebody who makes us feel happier, that's the closest thing to an absolute guarantee on love that you can get. It can't be written down in a contract. It has to be built into you, in who you are and how you were born, the temperament you were born with. KWML is that guarantee of love in general. So, let's look at some terms, and I promised you that most of what I do, I hope you will find, is elegant, meaning it's simple on the surface and therefore practical, but it's complex underneath, and you don't need to learn all the complexity. I've done that for you to simplify it for you and make it elegant. But if we look at some terms that are used by most people almost every day, words like self-esteem, happiness, anger, anxiety, and stress, you could also learn to see these words as elegant words, meaning we all use them and they're simple, but what will make them more practical and more powerful is understanding a little bit of the complexity underneath. It turns out that all of these words, self-esteem, happiness, anger, anxiety, and stress, all happen to also be words for types of energy, positive or negative. In other words, self-esteem is a type of positive emotional energy. Happiness is positive emotional energy. Anger is negative emotional energy. Anxiety is negative emotional energy. And stress is negative emotional energy. So if we learned a little more about the science of emotional energy, it would tell us a lot about how to make practical use of these words we use every day. So did you know your brain is electric? That it generates 10 to 12 watts of electricity? That's enough to power a flashlight. And electricity is just a form of energy. Well, self-esteem is a form of energy too. One of the interesting things about much of what we do for men and women is that when we're looking at psychology as a science, a lot of times other areas of science will give us models and metaphors to use that are still going to retain a lot of their practicality and power. And one of those is physics. So since the time of Freud and before Freud, it was pretty frequent that physicists and before them philosophers, people that studied the natural world, could make analogies and metaphors from the world of physics and apply them to psychology. Because remember, psychology is invisible but real, so it's always been very useful to take the natural world that we can see and hear and touch and weigh and use it to make analogies to this invisible world of psychology. Well, you know, there's a law in physics called the first law of thermodynamics. And it says that in terms of energy, thermodynamics is about energy, that energy equals energy equals energy. Whatever you decide to call it, it never disappears. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It simply transforms. This is a crucial concept, both for understanding the KWML and understanding MindOS. Energy is neither created nor destroyed. It can just be moved around or transformed into energy of another name, but it is never newly created nor destroyed. Well, if that is true of electricity and nuclear power and magnetism, then it is also true of self-esteem and love and friendship, as well as happiness, anger, anxiety, and stress. These are all just words for energy. Therefore, physics tells us in the law of thermodynamics that says energy is never created nor destroyed. That means self-esteem, happiness, anger, anxiety, and stress are never created nor destroyed. They're just moved around or transformed into other forms of energy. Remember that. It's going to matter.